Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 59th episode. My name is Andy Z. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California on July 1st, 2021. July 1st. Growing up, I always considered summer to begin after school in July and August. July and August, a hot time in the sun and doing various things. But this is a deadly summer. It is a hot summer. It's deadly hot. There's been a heat wave that's descended upon many parts of the world, and particularly in the northwest of the United States and Canada. It's been brought to people's attention as the temperatures climbed to 117 degrees in British Columbia in Canada. People have been dying every day. But this is nothing compared to the destruction of the environment that could cause global warming to be catastrophic for the future of humanity. There was a leaked report from an international governmental agency that's going to be coming out next February, that if the report is true, this leaked report, it says that we are likely to hit several trigger points which could be really catastrophic for humanity. And all of this is a product of the capitalist imperialist system that we live under. Yes, it's also been a hot summer for all those people in the bottom of society who don't have air conditioning in the tenements of Chicago, New York, the apartment buildings without air circulation and the houses without air. But this is a hot summer in a different way as well. A hot summer because the youth have no future under this system, and they get to play the game of little gangsta on the street corner, mimicking the way the big gangsters run this society, who are just as glad to see us, our youth, killing each other. The murder rate is climbing in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. 12 people were shot in New York on Tuesday. This has to end, and it's only going to end in the process of fighting for a whole different world, for a whole different future, through an actual revolution. We've been featuring on this show over the last 2 months, at the center of the work of the RevComs, a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution. I want to read a paragraph that begins this declaration and call. A paragraph that our audience has heard many times, but it's worth hearing over and over again. It says, who is this revolution for? Who are we addressing? When we say, let's get down to basics, we need a revolution, nothing less. Everyone who can't stand this world the way it is, who is sick and tired of so many people being treated as less than human, who knows that the claim of liberty and justice for all is a cruel lie, who is righteously enraged that injustice and equality go on and on and on, despite false promises and honeyed words from people in power or those seeking power. Everyone who agonizes about where things are headed and the fact that to be young now means to be denied a decent future or any future at all. Everyone who has ever dreamed about something much better or even wondered about whether that is possible. Everyone who hungers for a world without oppression, exploitation, poverty, and destruction of the environment. Everyone who has a heart to fight for something that is really worth fighting for. You need to be a part of this revolution. And this revolution is not just a good idea, it is actually possible. The first segment of today's show speaks to all of this. It's a flyer that needs to get out. It's a statement from Bob Avakian. Weapons of oppression and the heart to fight to end oppression. The heart to fight to end oppression. That's coming up in a few moments. After that segment, we're going to have a whole presentation of something that Bob Avakian did in 2003 as a speech, Revolution, why it's necessary, why it's possible, and what it's all about. Imagine a different future. And last but not at all least, Sunsara Taylor, my co-host, is going to be doing an important interview with Dr. Hern, who performs abortions in Colorado. He is a defiant. He is brave. He is an outspoken doctor who treats women in extreme emergencies from all over the world. And we're doing this segment now as part of an ongoing series to get deeply into this, as the Supreme Court of the United States has decided to hear a case this next year that could end this fundamental right for women to have full control of their bodies and to be full human beings. So I want to get started right away in today's episode, episode number 59 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, with this statement from Bob Avakian: weapons of oppression and the heart to fight to end oppression.
Weapons of oppression and the heart to fight to end oppression. This system has two big weapons it uses to maintain masses of people in a situation where they are oppressed, brutalized, degraded, and demoralized. The first weapon is the murderous armed force of this system, which, along with all its other atrocities, continually hunts down and kills Black, brown, and Native American people in the most depraved ways. The second weapon is the way this system messes people up and gets them thinking and acting in messed up ways, and especially how this system denies the youth a decent future, forcibly confines so many in miserable conditions, and gets them caught up in fighting and killing each other. This, too, is a monstrous crime of this system. What kind of system condemns so many youth to nothing better than this? What kind of system does so many people this way and then seizes on what it has got people caught up in, uses this as an excuse to treat masses of people as less than human, murder them in the thousands, and lock them up in the millions right in this country, while it slaughters people all around the world and destroys the earth? It is this monstrous system of capitalism, imperialism, that we are now forced to live under. A system that could not survive without viciously exploiting billions of people worldwide, including more than 150 million children. A system that never will and never can stop doing all this. But it doesn't have to be this way.
Hello, the Revolution Club is here. We're getting organized for a real revolution to overthrow the system.
We are the Rev Club. The mighty, mighty Rev comes.
We Revcoms are out to change all this. The only way it can be done, through an actual revolution to do away with this whole system. We have the science, the strategy and plan, and the leadership to do this. And we are actively working and waging the necessary struggle to bring forth and organize a revolutionary force of thousands and then millions from many different parts of society, and especially youth, whose anger, frustration, and desperation to make a mark in this world and be respected needs to be and can be transformed into determination to put an end to this system and to bring a radically different and much better world into being, to become emancipators of humanity. In a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution, we have made it clear. This not only cries out to be done, it is possible, and everyone who has a heart to fight for something really worth fighting for needs to get with this revolution we are working for now.
That was Bob Avakian from his recent piece, Weapons of Oppression and the Heart to Fight to End Oppression. Bob Avakian is a man, a revolutionary leader of tremendous heart for the oppressed of this planet, somebody whose work has been about enabling the oppressed to become emancipators for all of humanity. And I want to refer to a few points from the Declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution. This declaration has two parts, a short version and a longer version. I want to read what it says about Bob Avakian in the longer version. Bob Avakian, B.A., came forward as a revolutionary and developed into a communist leader through the mass revolutionary upsurge of the 1960s. He is an old white guy, yes. Deal with it. Unlike so many who considered themselves revolutionaries at that time, B.A. has never given up, never departed from the road of revolution. He has continued to advance on this road and confront the problems and difficulties in making revolution. He has drawn crucial lessons from the historical experience, positive and negative, of revolution throughout the world, and from many other aspects of human society and human endeavor. He has deeply studied how this system of capitalism, imperialism actually works, and what are the defining contradictions of this system that constitute the basis for overthrowing it. It is through all of this that he has brought forward a whole new framework for the liberation of all oppressed people and the emancipation of all humanity, the new communism. So this is who you're going to be hearing from. I want to go back to how we can get started organizing the forces for an actual revolution. By the forces, I mean the people. I mean all of you who watch this show, how you can go to work with all of us to organize the people to make this revolution. It says in part 4 of the short version, it says everywhere throughout society, spreading the word about this revolution and getting people together in real life and online to 1, grapple with why an actual revolution is necessary, 2, what such a revolution involves, and 3, what kind of society this is aiming for. Today's segment is going to deal with that last of those 3 points, what kind of society this is aiming for. But these 3 points are one integral whole. They're all together. Once you understand that there's no way of reforming this system, that it must be overthrown, and then you grapple with what this revolution actually is, what it's going to take to overthrow this capitalist imperialist system, then you have to be proceeding back from what kind of society would really liberate and emancipate all of humanity. When you work back from that, you can find the pathways to that future. And more than that, you can have the sustenance, the fortitude, the morality of who are we doing this for and what are we aiming for. We call that for whom and for what, to get to that revolutionary society. So that's what we're going to be doing in this segment. That's what we're going to be doing. That's what Bob Avakian's going to be doing. So before we go to the segment, Imagine a Whole New Society, I want to go back to something Bob Avakian says in the film, why we need an actual revolution and how we could really make revolution. At the end of part 1, and we played this in episode number 57, he says, this is not a revolution for revenge. The goal is not for exploited and suppressed humanity to have a chance to become exploiters and oppressors themselves. It is a communist revolution whose goal is nothing less than putting an end to all relations of exploitation and oppression and all the degradation and destruction bound up with this throughout the world. So let's go to this excerpt of the film, Revolution, Why It's Necessary, Why It's Possible, and What It's All About, a talk given by Bob Avakian in 2003.
Now let's imagine, let's step out of this world that they keep us chained in, and let's imagine what this future world can and will be like. When we finally get to the final goal of communism, there won't be the relations of exploitation and oppression that are so commonplace and that mark all of society today, and that we are told over and again are just the natural order of things and the way things have to be. As Karl Marx pointed out, the communist revolution leads to what we Maoists call the 4 alls. That is, the abolition of all class differences among people, the abolition or the end to all the production or economic relations underlying these class differences and divisions among people. The ending of all the social relations that go along with these economic or production relations. Oppressive relations between men and women, between different nationalities, between people in different parts of the world. All that will be put an end to and moved beyond. And finally, the revolutionizing of all the ideas that go along with this whole way, this whole capitalist system, these whole social relations. In place of this, what will be the guiding principles in society, consciously and voluntarily taken up by people, not forced on them, but consciously and voluntarily taken up as the basis for having abolished exploitation, oppression, and inequality. In its place will be collective and cooperative principles, aiming for the common good, and at the same time within that, individuals and individuality flourishing in a way that has never been possible before. The first great step or great leap on the road to communism is seizing power from the capitalists. Without that, none of this is possible. But seizing power from them opens the way to making the advance to communism. Socialism is the new society established after the seizure of power. Socialism is three things: a new economic system, a new political system, and a transition to the final goal of communism. Let's talk about what this will make possible right away once power has been seized. Let's talk about the whole different nature of socialism as a society in which the masses of people are digging up the old, rotten, and putrid soil of capitalism and moving forward to the goal of a communist world.
Bob Avakian began with, let's imagine. Let's step out of this world that they keep us chained in, and let's imagine what this future can and will be like. And he goes into that in great depth. It's going to come in a second. But I just want you to focus in and go back to what we just heard after you watch this whole show, where he goes into what kind of economy do we need? What kind of society? What are the relations we're going to overcome? And what are the ideas that people have to change? He makes the point that this is not human nature, but it's the nature of the system. And we're changing how people think, how people relate to each other through this revolution. So let's go back to the film and a vision of a whole new society.
Let's talk about work. Imagine, first of all, that you actually wanted to go to work. Imagine instead of being treated basically like an animal, being bossed around, treated as if all you were there for was to bend your back, but you had no idea about how things ought to be, that you couldn't contribute anything, that you had no ideas that were worth anything, that you were just always trying to get out of everything and do as little as you could, which of course you are under the capitalist system. But imagine if the conditions were changed so that weren't what you were doing. Imagine if you wanted to contribute. Imagine if your opinion were actually valued. Imagine if the character of work changed. Imagine if you knew when you produced something that it was for the good of the people, that it was helping the people's health needs or their needs for housing or their needs for textbooks for education that really told the truth. Imagine if besides that you were actually drawn into the administration of the place where you worked. If people like you chose representatives to be part of the committee running that place, together with the people who more full-time administered and the managers. Imagine if the administrators and the manager actually came down and worked with you some hours during the week and talked with you and saw the situation from where you were. Imagine if you held discussions where you worked and larger discussions among representatives of people about what was all this work for? What are we producing this for? How is this going to help the people in society? How can we support the struggle of the people throughout the world better through what we're producing through our work? Imagine if that were what work is like. Imagine housing. What if the housing, instead of belonging more to the rats than to the people, were actually decent housing fit for human beings? Imagine if everybody had a decent place to live, and more than that, Imagine if it weren't just everybody in their own little place trying to keep as much away from everybody else as they can, and you had to have 6 locks on your door so that all your shit didn't get stolen. Imagine if you actually had neighborhoods and communities that were being beautified, where flowers are being planted and playgrounds, not glass-infested, broken-down shit, but actual playgrounds for people, for children, for others. Imagine if people were encouraged to hang out together, to talk with each other, to form committees, to actually talk about, okay, what are we doing in this neighborhood, and how does it relate to the society and the world as a whole? And how does this neighborhood relate to the way people work? And how can we help each other out? And how many meals do we want to all eat together, and how much do we want to allow for people to go and have their own meals in their own houses, with their own families? How are we going to work all that kind of stuff out? Imagine if these are the kind of questions were being taken up in your neighborhood as well as in your work. And let's talk about work and housing together. Look at all these neighborhoods which, under the rule of the capitalist system, have been allowed and even encouraged to rot. Look at the youth and others just hanging out on the street corner with nothing to do, or no way to do anything that doesn't get them into one kind of trouble or another. Imagine changing all that, because now we have the power of society, and we go to these youth and we say, here, we're going to give you training, we're going to give you education, we're going to bring you materials, we're going to enable you to go to work to build some beautiful housing and playgrounds and neighborhoods here for yourself and others who live here. Imagine if we said to them, you can not just work, you can be part of planning all this. You can be part of figuring out what should be done for the benefit of the people, to make the society better, and to contribute to making a whole different and radically better world. Imagine if for these youth they could have a way to not just to make a living, building housing, hospitals, community centers, and parks, and other things people need, but at the same time they could have the opportunity and the dignity of working together with people throughout society to build a whole better world. There's absolutely no reason why these kind of things aren't possible, except that we live under this system which makes them impossible. Let's talk about education. Just like imagining people wanted to go to work, imagine kids who actually wanted to go to school. Imagine if they weren't degraded and insulted all the time, and treated as if they couldn't possibly learn anything or have any important ideas. Imagine if the educational system actually told them the truth and helped them to understand about the world and history and nature and society. Imagine if it actually helped them to think critically, to challenge everything. Yes, the teachers, yes, the and yes, even the party and its leaders. What if the educational system drew the kids in, along with the teachers and staff, and said, this is a whole new society, a new world. What are your ideas about how this could all be done better? Imagine if the education combined practical things with theory, so that things they were studying and learning, they would go out into society and talk to people who did those things. Or they invite people in, instead of casting the old people off like useless garbage. Invite the old people in to talk about the horrors of the old society and their experience and what the new society means to them, and have them have an exchange with these kids in the schools, and have the kids learn practical knowledge as well as studying theory and learning science and grappling with philosophy. The same in science. Right now, science often scares people. It's intimidating. You're taught that you can't possibly understand these things, that it's all mysterious. It's not the scientists' fault. It's the kind of society, or at least not mainly, it's the kind of society we have and the way in which they want people to be divided into different classes, groups, and castes. So that some people use their minds and other people can only use their bodies, or just waste away, or die fighting in a war. Imagine if science were brought to everybody and made the exciting thing it is for everybody. Struggling to investigate and learn about the world and the way it works, and all the different things, both here on earth and in the far, what the religious people call the heavens. Imagine if here in the realm also of science, The scientists got together with the quote-unquote ordinary people, with the students in the schools, with the workers in workplaces, and talked to them about science, drew them into scientific experiments and investigation, got their ideas, found out the questions they wanted to know about the world, and then worked up ways of people uniting together and cooperating to develop experiments and investigation in science that pursued these things. Imagine if science, like education and all these other parts of society, actually were serving to transform the society, to get rid of oppression, exploitation, and inequality, and to help the people throughout the world wage the revolutionary struggle to do the same. Imagine if we had a whole different art and culture. Come on, enough of this bitches and hoes and SWAT teams kicking down doors. Enough of this get low bullshit. And how come it's always the women that have to get low? We already have a situation where the masses of women and the masses of people are pushed down and held down low enough already. It's time for us to get up and get on up. Imagine if we had a society where there were a culture that, yes, was lively and full of creativity and energy and, yes, rhythm and excitement, but at the same time, instead of degrading people, lifted us up. Imagine if it gave us a vision and the reality of what it means to make a whole different society and a whole different kind of world. Imagine if it laid out the problems for people in making this kind of world and challenged them to take up these problems. Imagine if art and culture too, movies, songs, television, everything, challenged people to think critically, to look at things differently, to see things in a different light, but all pointing toward how can we make a better world. Imagine if the people who created art and culture were not just a few handfuls of people, but all the masses of people with all their creative energy unleashed, and the time were made for them to do that and for them to join in with people who are more full-time workers and creators in the realm of art and culture, to bring forward something new that would challenge people, would make them think in different ways, that would make them be able to see things critically and from a different angle, and would help them to be uplifted and help them to see their unity with each other and with people throughout the world in putting an end to all the horrors that we're taught are just the natural order of things. Imagine all that. This is not some kind of fantasy I'm talking about. This is what's been done in socialist societies. It's what's been done in the Soviet Union, and even more so in China in the time when our class, the proletariat, held power. This is what's been done in these spheres and every other part of society. Yes, we're going to have laws and a constitution in socialist society to protect the people, to protect their interests, and to protect their rights. But more than that, we're going to rely on the people. We're going to bring forward the people. We're going to enable them to wrangle with things and to thrash things out themselves collectively. We're going to lead them to challenge everything, to transform everything, to bring into being this whole new world and to do it together with the people of the world. And what I'm talking about, again, is not a fantasy. These are the things that have been done in the socialist societies that have existed, or they're the things that on the basis of that experience we have summed up and are learning more deeply need to be done. This is all possible. It's not some pipe dream. This is what happens when the mass of people rise up and take control over society. And this is what waits to be done.
So that was Bob Avakian from his 2003 speech, Revolution, Why It's Necessary, Why It's Possible, and What It's All About. This is the world that is possible. Much of what Bob Avakian spoke of was actually achieved or was begun in the first socialist societies, societies where, as Bob Avakian said, the proletariat held power. What this means is that these were societies that were on the road to overcoming all forms of exploitation and oppression. The first socialist state was won through the Russian Revolution in 1917 and was on the socialist road until the mid-1950s. And then in China, Mao Zedong led the revolution that came to power in 1949 and held power until his death in 1976. And they made tremendous revolutionary transformations in that society. Even as today, the people who are running China still call themselves the Communist Party, but they have turned China into a capitalist imperialist state. To learn more about that, you need to go to revcom.us and to the works of Bob Avakian. This experience, the tremendously positive as well as the negative experience and the errors, even grievous ones, has been studied and summed up by Bob Avakian. This has resulted in Bob Avakian, BA, bringing forth a whole new framework for the liberation of all oppressed people and the emancipation of all humanity. This is what we call the new communism.
Without the right to abortion, without the right to decide for themselves, without fear, stigma, or state interference when or whether to have a child, women cannot be free. And yet, never since 1973, when the right to abortion was won in this country, has abortion been more difficult to access, more dangerous to provide, or facing greater threat. In fact, just since January of this year, 561 restrictions have been introduced, including 165 outright bans on abortion in 47 states across this country. 83 of them, including 10 bans, have been enacted. Most alarmingly, the Supreme Court recently agreed to hear a case that could fundamentally challenge Roe v. Wade, the decision that legalized abortion in 1973. So it is with tremendous appreciation for his life's work and for agreeing to come on this show today, on the RNL show, that we welcome our next guest. Dr. Warren Hern has been performing abortions for women for nearly 50 years. He has faced threat and violence. He has seen colleagues and friends assassinated, and yet he has never backed down in the face of this. Not only that, he is one of a very few doctors in the world who proudly and publicly performs abortions later in pregnancy to women across this country and around the world. So, Dr. Warren Hern, it is our great pleasure to welcome you here today to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here.
So, Dr. Hern, abortion is one of the most common procedures for women to get. I believe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women will get an abortion in her lifetime. And yet it's one of the least spoken about, most shamed and stigmatized medical procedures. And I wonder if you could talk about who are the women that you serve, what brings them to your clinic, and why this is so important to their lives.
Well, I think that one of the things to think about is the fact that pregnancy is not a benign condition. It's a life-threatening condition. Women die from being pregnant, and that's been always true in all human history. But the main fact is that women need to be able to make the decision not only to protect their health, to be able to continue their lives, and it's not simply be at the mercy of their reproductive biology. And I think that the women come in and they're, for example, very young women who adolescents say, I'm not old enough to have a baby. I don't know what to do. No education, no job, no partner, not able to support a child, not able to take care of a child. And some of them are not ready even to take care of themselves. And if you have a 12 or 13-year-old girl who's the victim of rape or incest, for example, there's no reason why that girl should be forced to continue the pregnancy and have a baby. And then you have young women who are just starting their lives, and they're pregnant and they're not ready to be a parent. They want to finish their education. They want to have some security. They want to have a partner, or maybe they have a partner who is unable to help them. Then you have women who are later in the reproductive age, who in fact have a desired pregnancy, could have a catastrophic complication with the pregnancy. And so just recently, a young woman came in from a red state where she couldn't get an abortion. And her doctors had discovered that she had conjoined twins, were joined at the chest. There was one heart. There was no hope of any survival. Pregnancy was a threat to her life. The only way that they normally manage this in obstetrics is to have the patient go to term and then do a vertical C-section incision, which damages the uterus. It's much more likely to rupture the next pregnancy. It's a very dangerous situation, and there's no hope for survival. We took care of this woman, and she came in. She was extremely hostile to us, angry, contemptuous. We had her attitude toward me was disgust and contempt because I perform abortions. We took care of her, and we got her through that. And she and her mother were very, very moved, and they wanted to hold their babies and grieve, and we helped them do that. Many things about that. And anyway, this is someone desperately needed to have this procedure, which we did, and saved her having this C-section. But in another century, this was a death sentence. This pregnancy was a death sentence. And I work in the Peruvian Amazon. I worked there since I was a medical student in 1964. Out there in the Amazon, tribal society, this pregnancy is a death sentence. So we need to be able to have the freedom to help women, no matter what the situation is.
The anti-abortion movement has claimed to be motivated by the desire to preserve life. And in fact, what they are doing is endangering the lives of real people, women. You have frequently called this out and said the anti-abortion movement is the face of fascism in this country. And I wonder if you could talk some about that.
Well, it is. It's a violent fascist movement led by a white supremacist Christians. And they have laid the groundwork for people like Donald Trump and the radical right of the Republican Party. We now have a violent, first of all, the anti-abortion movement is a violent fascist movement that will stop at nothing to impose their views on other people, up to and including assassination. They've assassinated 5 of my medical colleagues. They've killed a bunch of other people. They assassinated one of my best friends, Dr. George Taylor. I'm on the hit list. They've tried to kill me, and my life is at risk every single day. This is not. These people are opposed to democracy. They're opposed to individual freedom. They're opposed to free speech. They're opposed to basic premises of Western society. And now, under Trump, they were running the government. And I think that one of the most dangerous things is that the radical political right has joined 45 years ago with the radical religious right, formed this movement, which is about power. It has nothing to do with protecting women. By keeping women from having contraception and safe abortion, they're leading. This leads to more unplanned pregnancies, more abortion, and more maternal deaths. The women died by the thousands before we had legal abortion in this country. That's what they want. They want to punish women. So there's a mixture of authoritarianism and the linkage to the Republican Party to get power. So the Republican Party now is a fascist political party. It is a fascist led by white supremacist Christians. Christianity, in fact, is in my opinion, has become the face of fascism in this country. And who else besides the fundamentalist Christians are so prepared to believe the absolute nonsense, put it very politely, spewed by Donald Trump and the Republican leaders, because they have learned to believe absolute preposterous nonsense from the time they're first awake. That is the basic teachings of Christianity, that don't believe in facts, believe in some superstition or ignorance. So I think that this is a fundamentalist religious fascist movement, and what they want is a fascist theocracy. That's what their aim, and the evangelicals have been after that for a long time.
And what would you say to those who are breathing a great sigh of relief because Trump is out of office and they just want to pretend that this is behind us?
Well, that's false comfort, because 25%, just a poll just the other day, 25% of the people in this country want an authoritarian government who are very, very authoritarian in their attitudes. 60-something% of the people in this country believe in the devil. More people believe in the devil than believe in evolution, which is a basic biological fact. No matter what atrocities Trump inflicted on the country, he had a basic support of about 40% of the people. And I think that 80 or 89% of the Republicans support Trump, in spite of the fact that he's a cruel fascist bully who's ignorant and who is a sociopath. He's mentally ill, and they believe everything he says, and they'll do what he says. We came within minutes of a military coup d'état in this country on January the 6th, which would have destroyed democracy. So Trump and his people are the worst thing that's happened since the country was founded, and I'm including the Civil War. Yes, there were 700,000 people died in the Civil War, but Trump killed over 500,000 people by the way he handled the COVID deal. And Lincoln was there to protect the American government, to protect democracy and freedom, where Trump has spent his entire time trying to oppose democracy. Now he's in the middle of the Republican Party, which is opposed to democracy. The Republican Party is basically saying, if we don't win, then we don't count the election. So that you can't have a democracy in a circumstance like that. So I think that Trump is out of office, but he's out trying to inflame his followers, believe everything he says, no matter how silly or awful it is. And I think that Trump wants a civil war. And at his rally in Ohio on Saturday, there were people actively there who saying they want a civil war. That's what they're going for, because they believe in this kind of violence.
I wanted to circle back to the question of the women, where you just ended, the lives of women. And you talked about when abortion was illegal, that many women died, and that's true. And you've spoken about the risk to women's health. But I think one of the things that's also stood out from you, as I've heard you over the years, and from other doctors who do this work, is how much being forced to have a child against one's will affects the entire existence of a woman.
We have evolved in time as sexual beings. That's what we. That's the way evolution arranges to keep species going, and so that's an important part of our lives. One of the consequences for women is pregnancy, obviously, and there was a time when women who were simply at the mercy of pregnancy, at the mercy of this condition, which could kill them, and they might be happy, they may not be, but they were at risk of death. It's one thing for a woman to feel that she wants to have a baby and she's willing to experience the risk of pregnancy with good medical help, and she's entitled to the best medical care she can have, make sure that she survives the pregnancy and has a healthy baby. But if she doesn't want to be pregnant, there is absolutely no justification whatsoever of forcing her to continue the pregnancy to term. There's no medical, legal, philosophical, any kind of religious or any kind of justification. Religious justifications are about power. It's about controlling the lives of women. And so the lack of access to safe abortion services means that women are at the mercy of these circumstances. Maybe they're at the mercy of an abusive spouse. Maybe they're victims of rape or incest. And the pregnancy is, for them, is a threat to their life, both their physical existence and continuing their life as they wish. And so helping women end pregnancies when they want to do and when they must do it is an absolutely critical, fundamental, basic medical care. Okay, that's what it is. And it's a safe abortion is a fundamental component of women's health care. That's an absolute keystone proposition. But the larger picture that threatens democratic society is that the Republican Party which earn eternal disgrace, has used the abortion and stepped on the bodies of women 45 years using the abortion issue to get power, and they've been very successful.
Dr. Warren Hern, I have to say it's been a tremendous pleasure to talk to you today. I think we first spoke almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago, during the Bush years. You were one of the very first people I ever interviewed on live radio. And
I remember that.
at the time, I was so impressed by your decades of service to women and your courage on the front lines. And that has only deepened in the 15 plus years since. So I just want to thank you so much for all that you've done, for all the thousands of women that you have helped, and for, again, the moral example you've set for so many, and for joining us here today on the Revolution Nothing Less show, and on your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm glad we got the internet connection fixed. Thank you.
Me too. Me too. It's been a great pleasure.
All right.
Thank you for your happy birthday greeting.
Before we close out the show, I just want to reiterate what I said at the beginning of that interview, that without the right to abortion, without the right to decide for themselves when and whether to have a child free of fear, stigma, and shame, or interference from the state, women cannot be free. This is why millions of people need to be saying and acting on the demand for abortion on demand and without apology. But to bring about a world where all forms of violence and oppression, degradation and abuse against women are finally ended, we need a revolution that overthrows this whole system of capitalism and imperialism that has this oppression and so many other forms of oppression and exploitation built into it. A key part of the revolution that we're making and fighting for is to shatter and completely abolish the thousands of years of traditions chains that have bound women and all oppression based on gender and sexual orientation. And precisely because of how vicious and ugly this current assault on women's lives is, there is increased potential right now to mobilize the fury and organize the rage of women as a driving force to make this revolution. This is why we say break the chains, unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution. So with that, I want to ask you, Andy, if there's anything you want to say before we close out.
Well, I think it was important that you did that interview, and it's the beginning of different segments we're going to be doing over the next year on the question of abortion and the fight for the emancipation, the liberation of women and the emancipation of all of humanity. I just have a couple things before we close out today's episode. The first being that earlier we played an extensive segment from Revolution, Why It's Necessary, Why It's Possible, and what it's all about. You can access that film. The segment we played was Imagine a Whole Different Society. And that, a good deal of what Bob Avakian said there is in the book Basics in Chapter 2. And so I want to recommend that that's another way that you can get deeply into that material. You can get Basics from revcom.us. You can read it there, or you can go to Revolution Books websites and order a copy. And also I want to say that in that segment that we played, Bob Avakian speaks of that there will be a constitution in the new socialist society. And since that talk, Bob Avakian has written a constitution for the new socialist society, the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America. This is a blueprint for the new society. It goes deeply into how you can build a society that be a place where people would really want to live, but that is actually fundamentally going to work on how to overcome all forms of oppression. It's actually a transition to that whole new society of communism that he spoke of. So with that, I think we should wrap up today's episode number 59, and we'll see you next week, Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that's it. Good night, Sunsara.
Good night.